On the night Alpha Draven banished his pregnant Luna, the pack didn't hear her scream. They heard silence. Because the moment she crossed the border, the bond they thought was sacred shattered in a way no wolf had ever seen before. But what Draven didn't know was that the child she carried had already awakened inside her womb, and that the woman he just cast out was not the Luna he thought she was. She was something the moon itself had hidden for centuries, and the stranger he chose was never his true bond. It was a trap. On the night Luna Seline stood beside Alpha Draven, the entire pack believed they understood her story. They believed she was chosen out of necessity, a political union, a calculated alliance meant to stabilize power. Nothing more. They believed her silence meant obedience. Her lowered gaze meant submission. Her presence meant nothing at all. But there is something the pack did not understand. Silence does not always mean weakness. Sometimes, it means something is waiting. Before she ever stood beside the Alpha, before the title of Luna was forced upon her, Seline was already being watched. Not by wolves, not by the council, but by something older than the laws that govern the pack. Because long before Draven ever made his decision, long before the pack ever whispered her name with doubt, Seline carried something that did not belong to their world. And no one asked the question that should have been asked first. Why did the moon remain full for 3 nights after she entered their territory? They called her half-blood. They said her origins were unclear. That no known pack claimed her. That her scent did not fully belong to wolf or human. But what they never admitted, what they refused to confront, was that her presence unsettled things that had always been certain. Wolves that never bowed lowered their heads when she passed. The forest shifted around her steps, and the pack's oldest records, kept hidden, sealed, untouched for generations, began to surface, as if something recognized her, before she even recognized herself. Alpha Draven knew all of this. He saw it before anyone else did. The moment he first stood in her presence, his wolf did not react with hunger or desire. It went still, not calm, still, as if it had encountered something it could not name. And in that moment, before the council, before the pack, before the binding, he made a decision. Not out of trust, not out of belief, but out of control. He chose her, so he could keep her close, so he could watch her, so he could make sure whatever she carried never grew beyond his reach. And yet there was something he never admitted. Not to the council, not to his beta, not even to himself. Seline was already with child. The timeline did not make sense. It could not make sense, because by the laws of the pack, by everything the wolves believed about bonding, lineage, and blood, a Luna could not carry an Alpha's heir. Before the bond was sealed, it was impossible, unheard of, forbidden by nature itself. And yet, Seline's body told a different story. The pack healer knew. She confirmed the signs in silence. She saw the changes no one else could see. She felt the pulse that did not match Seline's own. And when Draven demanded the truth, she hesitated. Not out of fear of the Alpha, but out of fear of the answer. Because what she sensed was not simply a child. It was something forming with intention. Something that responded. Something that listened. Draven was given a choice in that moment. Ask the question. Or bury it. And he chose to bury it. He did not question the timing. He did not demand proof. He did not call for council judgment. Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He accepted the lie he created for himself. That the child was his. That the timeline did not matter. That whatever felt wrong would correct itself once the bond was complete. But bonds do not correct truth. They expose it. From the moment Seline stepped into the role of Luna, the cracks began to form. Not loudly. Not in ways the pack could easily see. But in the spaces between certainty. She did not behave like other Lunas. She did not seek influence. She did not claim authority. She did not fight for acceptance. She simply observed, as if she were waiting for something to reveal itself. And sometimes, when the moon rose high enough, she would place her hand over her stomach and stand completely still, as if listening, as if something inside her was speaking back. The healer saw it. The beta noticed it. Even Draven, though he never spoke of it, felt it. A distance. Not emotional. Not physical. But something deeper. As if Seline was not fully anchored to the world around her. And still no one asked the question. Because asking it would mean admitting something the pack was not ready to face. What if the Luna they had accepted was never meant to be bound to them at all? The records began to shift again. Ancient texts, long dismissed as myth, described a bloodline that could not be traced. A lineage that did not follow alpha laws. A presence that could carry life, before being claimed, before being marked, before being recognized. The healer read those texts in secret, and for the first time in her life, she refused to report what she found, because if she spoke the truth, the pack would not protect Seline. They would destroy her. And so the silence continued. Draven remained willfully blind. The healer remained silent. The beta remained watchful. And Seline remained calm. Too calm. Because, while the pack debated her worth, while they questioned her blood, while they whispered about her presence, they never realized one thing. The child inside her was not waiting to be accepted. It was waiting to be revealed. And somewhere within the territory, on nights when the wind stopped completely and the forest held its breath, there was a second heartbeat. Not loud, not violent, but steady, certain, unquestionable. A heartbeat that did not belong to the pack. A heartbeat that did not belong to the alpha. A heartbeat that had already begun to change everything. On the night the blood moon rose over Black Ridge, the pack believed they were witnessing a blessing. They gathered in silence. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder. Elders formed a circle of judgment. And, at the center, Alpha Draven waited, because the ritual they were about to perform had not been seen in generations. A calling, a confirmation, a moment where the moon itself was said to reveal truth. But what arrived that night was not what the pack expected. She did not come with a warning. There was no scout signal, no scent trail carried on the wind, no sound of movement through the forest. One moment, the border stood empty. The next, she was already there. A woman, unmarked, unannounced, standing exactly where the ritual line met the edge of the territory, as if she had always known where to find it, as if she had been expected. The first wolf to see her stepped back, not out of fear, out of confusion, because her scent did not travel. It did not reach them the way every living thing should. It existed and didn't. Faint and yet impossible to ignore. The guards did not attack. They did not question. They did something far more unusual. They allowed her to stand there. Word spread through the pack faster than instinct. And within minutes, every eye had turned toward the border, including Draven's. He felt it before he saw her. A pull. Sharp. Immediate. Uncontrolled. Not the steady recognition of a bond. Not the slow burn of attraction. This was something else. Something that demanded attention. Something that did not ask for permission. When his eyes finally met hers, the reaction was instant. His wolf surged forward. Not cautiously, not carefully, but with force. As if it had been waiting. And that was the moment everything changed. She stepped forward without hesitation, crossing into the territory as though no law applied to her. And when she spoke, her voice carried through the entire clearing. Clear, steady, certain. I have come, she said, because the moon has chosen. No one interrupted her. No one challenged her claim, because even before she finished speaking, the pack had already begun to feel it. Recognition. Not in their minds. In their instincts. Wolves who had never submitted to anyone but their alpha lowered their heads. The air shifted. The ground itself seemed to settle beneath her presence. And for the first time since the ritual began, uncertainty spread through the elders. She turned her gaze toward Draven and held it, without hesitation, without fear, without doubt. "I am the one bound to you," she said, "not by choice, not by arrangement, but by decree." The words should have caused outrage. They should have sparked resistance. They should have been questioned. They weren't, because the bond responded. Draven felt it, not as a whisper, not as a possibility, but as something immediate, something undeniable, a connection that pressed against his senses with intensity, a force that demanded acknowledgement. And for a moment, he believed it. But belief is not always truth, because while the pack stepped closer, while the elders exchanged silent approval, while the beta narrowed his eyes in calculation, there was one person who did not move. Seline. She stood at the edge of the circle, silent, watching. Not the stranger, not Draven, but everything in between, because something was wrong. It wasn't obvious. Not at first. Not to anyone else. But Seline noticed what others did not. The wolves who bowed never looked directly at the stranger. Their heads lowered, their bodies submitted, but their eyes avoided hers. That was not loyalty. That was not recognition. That was something else. And then, it happened. The stranger spoke again, softly this time, not to the pack, not to the alpha, but simply into the space between them. And Seline felt it, a sharp, sudden movement. From within, her breath caught, her body stiffened, her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The child reacted, not gently, not curiously, but violently. A pulse, a surge, a force that pressed outward from within her, as if something inside her had awakened and did not like what it sensed. Seline's fingers tightened. Her vision blurred for a moment, and, for the first time since entering the pack, she felt something she could not control. Resistance. The child pushed against her, not in fear, not in confusion, but with intent, as if it recognized the presence before her, and rejected it. Seline lifted her gaze, slowly, carefully, and for the first time, she looked directly at the stranger. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not a bond, not a connection, but an awareness. The stranger's expression did not change. Her posture remained perfect. Her voice remained calm. But for a single moment, too brief for anyone else to notice, her gaze flickered. Not with fear, not with doubt, but with recognition. As if she understood exactly what Seline carried. As if she had been looking for it. Seline's breathing slowed. Her hand remained pressed against her stomach. The child had gone still again. But the silence inside her was not calm. It was watchful. Across the clearing, Draven took a step forward, drawn closer, pulled by the force of what he believed to be fate. The pack watched in anticipation. The elders prepared to speak. The ritual continued to unfold. But Seline did not move, because the question had already formed. Clear. Unavoidable. Impossible to ignore. If this woman was truly sent by the moon, if this bond was real, if this moment was meant to happen, then why did the life growing inside her respond as if it had just encountered an enemy? There are moments in every pack's history that are remembered not because they were understood, but because no one could explain them. The night of the bond confirmation ceremony was one of those moments. By the time the ritual circle was drawn, the decision had already been made, not spoken, not voted on, but felt. The elders did not question the stranger's claim. The warriors did not challenge her presence. And Alpha Draven did not step away, because the force pulling him toward her had not weakened. If anything, it had grown stronger. The sacred ground was prepared in silence. A circle carved into the earth, marked with ash, sealed with blood. Ancient symbols etched into the soil, symbols that had governed bonds long before the current pact existed. This was not a simple ceremony. This was confirmation. Final. Irreversible. 2 positions were set within the circle. One for the alpha. One for the one claiming the bond. Seline was not called forward. She stood outside the circle. Not as Luna. Not as mate. But as something waiting to be dismissed. And still, she did not speak. The stranger stepped into position without hesitation. Her movements were precise. Measured. As though she had performed this ritual before. Or had known exactly how it would unfold. Draven followed. One step. Then another. Until he stood beside her. For a brief moment, the entire clearing held its breath. Because this was the moment where truth revealed itself. Not through words. Not through claims. But through the bond itself. The elder began the invocation. Ancient words spoken in a language few still understood. A call to the moon. A demand for clarity. A command for the bond to reveal its truth. And then, the marking began. Draven's hand lifted. The stranger mirrored him. Their wrists aligned. Skin to skin. At first, everything seemed normal. A glow. Faint. Silver. Forming between them. The early sign of connection. The first indication that the bond was responding. The pack relaxed. Some even smiled. Because this was what they expected. What they needed. What they had already accepted. But then, something changed. The glow hesitated. Not fading. Not strengthening. As if something had interrupted it. The elder's voice faltered for the first time. Only slightly. But enough to be noticed. Draven felt it next. A shift. Sharp. Unsettling. The connection that had begun to form did not deepen. It split. Not outward. Not away. But inward. The glow flickered. Once. Twice. Then fractured. And suddenly, Draven was no longer standing in one bond. He was standing in 2. The first was steady. Cold. Precise. The connection to the woman beside him. It held firm. Unwavering. Clean. The second was something else entirely. It surged through him without warning. Not gentle. Not controlled. But overwhelming. Pain. Not his. But felt through him. A pull that did not connect from the circle. But from beyond it. From behind him. From Seline. Draven's breath caught. His body tensed. Because the sensation did not make sense. It could not make sense. The bond he was forming was supposed to replace what came before. Erase it. Serve it completely. Not coexist with it. But both connections remained. One is calm. One breaking. And the one that was breaking was not fading quietly. It was resisting. It pressed against him. Demanded recognition. Pushed through the forming bond like something refusing to be erased. Draven's vision blurred. For a moment, he saw 2 paths. 2 truths. 2 claims. The stranger beside him. And something else he could not ignore. The elder's voice rose sharply. A command. A push to complete the ritual. To force the bond into place. Because something had gone wrong. But rituals do not wait for understanding. They demand completion. And Draven had to choose. Not with words. Not with reason. But with instinct. One bond offered stability. Control. Clarity. The other offered nothing but intensity. Confusion. And a pain that did not belong to him. Yet refused to let go. For a fraction of a second, he hesitated. And then, he chose. He turned fully toward the stranger. Accepted the connection. Allowed it to settle. And the moment he did, the second bond screamed. Not aloud. Not in the clearing. But through him. A rupture. A force tearing through something that refused to break cleanly. And, outside the circle, Seline collapsed. No warning. No sound. Just a sudden loss of strength. her body hitting the ground as though something had been pulled out from within her. The glow between Draven and the stranger stabilized.
Bright. Complete.
Unquestionable. The pack exhaled, relief spreading through the clearing. The ritual appeared successful. But no one moved toward Seline. No one asked why she had fallen. No one questioned the moment that had just passed. Except, for one, the healer, because she had felt it. Not through the ritual, not through the bond, but through something deeper. The connection that had broken had not ended. It had been forced into silence. And silence is not the same as absence. Seline lay still, her breathing shallow, her hand pressed weakly against her stomach. Inside her, the child did not react with pain. It went quiet, not as if it had been hurt, but as if it had made a decision. Across the circle, Draven stood beside his chosen Luna, the bond intact, the ritual complete, the outcome accepted. And yet, something remained unresolved. Because bonds do not split without reason. They do not fracture without cause. And they do not rewrite themselves without consequence. The pack believed they had witnessed confirmation, a rightful claim, a moment of clarity. But what they had truly witnessed was something far more complicated. A bond that refused to disappear, a connection that would not release, and a choice that did not end what came before, but buried it beneath something unstable. And as the ceremony concluded, as the circle was broken, as the pack turned away from what they did not understand, one question remained, unspoken, unanswered. If the bond was never meant to hold two truths, then why did it refuse to break completely? There are decisions a pack makes that echo far beyond the moment they are spoken, not because they are loud, but because something listens when they are made. By the time the ceremony ended, Seline was no longer seen as Luna. She was no longer seen as mate. She was no longer seen as belonging. What remained was a question no one wanted to answer. And when a question cannot be answered, packs do what they have always done. They remove it. The council did not call it fear. They called it protection. They called it preservation of bloodlines. They called it necessary. But the word they chose was far simpler. Unstable. The term spread quickly, passed from elder to warrior, from warrior to servant, from servant to every corner of the territory. Luna Seline was now unstable blood. No trial, no defense, no attempt to understand what had happened inside that ritual circle, because understanding requires patience, and patience had already been replaced by something else. Concern, not for her, but for what she carried. The healer tried to speak. Once. Only once. She stepped forward before the final declaration, her voice careful, measured, as though choosing each word might prevent something irreversible. There are signs we have not yet interpreted, she said. The child. But she did not finish. Because the council did not want interpretation. They wanted resolution. The beta spoke next. Not loudly. Not forcefully. But with enough certainty to end the discussion. If the bond resisted, he said, then something interfered. A glance toward Seline. And if something interfered, then it should not remain within our borders. No one challenged him, because what he offered was an explanation simple enough to accept. And simple explanations are dangerous. Draven stood at the center of it all, silent, still, watching. This was the moment he could have stopped it, the moment he could have asked the question he avoided from the beginning, the moment he could have acknowledged what he felt inside the ritual. The second bond, the one that had not disappeared. But he did not speak, because acknowledging it would mean admitting something he was not ready to face, that the choice he made did not end what came before. And so he allowed the council to decide. Seline was brought forward, not gently, not with respect, but with distance. No one touched her directly. They guided her, directed her, moved her as though contact itself carried risk. She did not resist. Her steps were steady, her expression unchanged, her silence unbroken. Only once did she look toward Draven, and when she did, there was no anger, no desperation, no plea, only recognition, as if she already understood something the rest of them had yet to see. The accusation was spoken aloud.
Clear.
Final. The blood she carries is not aligned with the pack. The child has not been accepted by the bond. The risk cannot be contained. And then, the decision. Exile. The words settled over the clearing like something permanent. No one moved at first, because exile is not just removal. It is erasure. It means the pack does not acknowledge what leaves. It means the bond is considered broken. It means whatever remains no longer exists to them. Seline did not argue. She lowered her gaze, placed one hand over her stomach, and waited. The guard stepped forward, careful, measured. They did not drag her immediately. There was hesitation, not from orders, but from instinct, because something about her had not changed. Even now, standing alone, marked for exile, the air around her remained still, too still. And then, they moved her,
Through the center of the pack.
past the warriors, past the elders, past the place where she once stood as Luna. No one spoke, because silence is easier than questioning. The border came into view, the line every wolf understands, the point where territory ends and uncertainty begins. Seline stopped there, not because she was told to, but because something made her pause. For a moment, everything held. The wind, the trees, the breath of every wolf present. And then,
The moon changed.
it did not dim. It did not fade. It shifted. For 3 seconds, the light turned. Not silver, not white, black-red. A color no one had ever seen reflected across the territory. A color that did not belong to any known phase. The elders looked up. The warriors tensed. The beta stepped back without realizing it. And every wolf heard it. A heartbeat. Not faint. Not distant.
Clear. Steady.
But not their own. It did not match the rhythm of the pack. It did not align with Draven. It did not belong to any living wolf standing in that clearing. It came from somewhere else. Somewhere closer than they wanted to admit. Seline's hand pressed tighter against her stomach. Her breathing slowed. Her posture straightened. And for the first time since the accusation, she spoke. Not loudly. Not forcefully. But with a certainty that carried through the silence. You didn't reject me. Every ear turned toward her. You rejected what's coming. No one answered. No one moved. Because something in her voice did not sound like a warning. It sounded like a statement. The moon returned to normal. The color faded. The heartbeat stopped.
Just like that.
As if it had never happened. The guards completed their task. Seline stepped beyond the border. And the moment she crossed, the connection to the pack was cut. Officially. But not completely. Because some things do not end when they are dismissed. Draven remained where he stood, watching the place where she had disappeared. And for a brief moment, so brief it almost passed unnoticed, he felt it again. That second bond. Not gone.
Quiet.
Waiting. Behind him, the stranger stood still.
Perfect.
Unshaken. But her gaze did not follow Seline. It remained fixed on the space just beyond the border. As if she knew something had not left. As if she understood. This was not the end. The pack turned away. The council declared the matter closed. The territory returned to order. But order built on unanswered questions does not remain stable. Because something had changed. Something had begun. And far beyond the border. In the silence where Seline now walked alone, that same heartbeat returned. Stronger. Steadier, closer to the surface. And whatever it belonged to was no longer hidden. Only one question remained. Not spoken, not understood, but impossible to ignore. What was coming? There are changes a pack can see, and then there are changes a pack feels, long before it understands them. The morning after the exile, nothing appeared broken. The borders still stood. The warriors still patrolled. The alphas still ruled. And the new Luna remained exactly where she was expected to be. But something had already begun to shift. It did not arrive with noise. There was no alarm, no immediate threat, no visible fracture in the structure of the pack. Instead, it settled in slowly, quietly, almost perfectly. The stranger, now accepted as Luna, did not assert control. She did not demand authority. She did not challenge tradition. She simply existed within it. And that was the first detail no one questioned. Because influence is not always taken. Sometimes it is allowed. Within hours, the first signs appeared. Subtle, easy to dismiss. A patrol returned early. Not because of danger, but because they felt there was nothing left to guard. A warrior forgot his assigned post. Not entirely. Just long enough for it to go unnoticed. The beta paused mid-command. Just for a moment. As if the next instruction had slipped away before it could be spoken. No one called it unusual, because each incident, on its own, meant nothing. But patterns do not require permission to form. By the second night, the borders began to weaken. Not physically. The lines remained. The markings were still in place. But the wolves guarding them no longer felt their importance. Territory is not held by land. It is held by belief. And belief was beginning to fade. Draven noticed it first in the silence. The kind of silence that does not come from peace, but from absence. Less communication. Fewer reports. Shorter responses. His pack was still present, but something in their awareness had shifted. And at the center of it all stood the new Luna, unchanged, unchallenged, untouched by the confusion around her. She moved through the pack with calm precision, speaking when necessary, observing when not. And every time she passed, wolves responded. They lowered their heads. They stepped aside. They obeyed. But something was missing. Recognition. Their bodies followed. Their instincts reacted. But their eyes did not fully understand why. The healer saw it clearly. She had spent years studying bonds, understanding the connection between Alpha and Luna, the balance it created, the stability it required. This was not that. Because true bonds do not erase awareness. They do not blur thought. They do not replace memory with uncertainty. This connection was doing something else.
It was simplifying.
Reducing resistance, dulling instinct, making obedience easier, without ever demanding it. And that was when she began to search. Not openly, not where others could see. She returned to the old records. The ones hidden beneath generations of dust. The ones no one referenced unless something could not be explained. And there, she found it. Not a name, not a direct answer, but a pattern. Descriptions of bonds that did not originate from the moon. Connections formed not by destiny, but by design. Bindings that could mimic truth, replicate recognition, imitate the pull of fate, but only for a time. Because imitation does not hold under pressure. And every one of those records ended the same way, with collapse. The healer closed the text. Her hands still. Her breath is steady. Because the conclusion was no longer avoidable. The bond inside the pack was not real. It had been constructed. Meanwhile, Draven felt it in a different way. At first, the connection to the new Luna gave him clarity. A sense of control. A steady, unwavering presence at his side. But slowly, that clarity began to narrow. Decisions became easier. Too easy. Questions that once required thought no longer felt necessary. Doubt began to disappear. And with it, something else. awareness. Because true leadership requires friction. It requires resistance. It requires the ability to question what feels right. Without that, control becomes something else entirely. And Draven did not yet realize. He was no longer leading with instinct. He was responding. Across the territory, loyalty shifted. Not dramatically. Not in ways that caused alarm, but in quiet adjustments. Wolves who once followed the beta began to look toward the Luna instead. Decisions once made through council began to align without discussion. Agreement spread.
Fast.
Unquestioned. And that was the moment the pattern became undeniable. Because loyalty does not move that quickly. Not without cause. Not without influence. The truth, once uncovered, did not come all at once. It revealed itself in fragments. Pieces that only made sense when placed together. The bond, the silence, the shifting awareness, the fading resistance, and finally, the realization. She was not chosen by the moon. She was placed, bound not by fate, but by something constructed to resemble it. A manipulation, carefully designed, precisely executed. But manipulation requires intention, and intention requires a source. Someone had sent her. Someone had known exactly how to bypass the pack's instincts, how to create a bond that would not be questioned, how to insert influence without triggering resistance. And whoever that was had planned for this moment long before the blood moon rose. But there was one detail that did not fit the design, one variable that had not been accounted for. Seline, more specifically, what she carried. Because while the pack adjusted, while the bond settled, while the illusion held, the stranger began to change. Not outwardly, not in ways the pack could see, but in the moments when she was alone, when no one watched, when the silence returned. Her composure shifted. Slightly. Her gaze would drift. Not toward the alpha, not toward the pack, but toward the border. As if measuring distance. As if calculating time. Because whatever control she held within the territory did not extend beyond it. And beyond it, something remained. Something she could not influence. Something she could not suppress. Something that had not been removed when Seline crossed the line. The child. The same presence that disrupted the bond. The same force that resisted the ritual. The same heartbeat that echoed across the pack. It had not disappeared. It had grown. And for the first time since her arrival, the stranger felt something unfamiliar. Not uncertainty, not doubt, but limitation. Because whatever she had been sent to control was no longer contained. And control only works when nothing pushes back. The pack did not see it. Draven did not feel it. The council did not question it. But the healer understood. The balance had shifted. Not in favor of the stranger. Not in favor of the alpha. But toward something else entirely. Something that had not revealed itself yet. And somewhere beyond the border, in the quiet where no influence reached, that same steady heartbeat continued, unaffected, unchanged, waiting, leaving only two questions behind. Not spoken, not answered, but impossible to ignore. Who sent her? And why? Does something designed to control a pack fear a child that has not even been born? There are stories the packs tell about what happens beyond the border. Stories meant to warn, to control, to explain the unknown in ways that make it easier to ignore. They say those who are exiled do not survive, that the forest takes them, that the wild breaks them, that whatever lies outside the territory does not allow the weak to endure. But those stories were never tested against someone like Seline, because Seline did not disappear. She crossed the border and kept walking. No escort, no protection, no place to return to, only silence. The kind of silence that does not comfort, that does not guide, that does not promise anything beyond the next step. And yet she did not hesitate, because whatever had begun inside her was no longer waiting for permission. The first night beyond the border, the change was subtle. A difference in the air. A shift in how the forest responded to her presence. Animals did not flee. They did not approach. They simply watched, as if something about her required attention. Seline moved through unfamiliar terrain with a steadiness she did not question. Her body should have weakened. The journey should have slowed her. The absence of the pack should have left her vulnerable. But none of that happened. Instead, she adapted. Her senses sharpened. Her awareness extended further into the space around her. And when the moon rose, the change became impossible to ignore. At first, it was only a sensation. A warmth beneath her skin. Not painful. Not overwhelming. But constant. She stopped. Placed her hand against her arm. And for the first time,
She saw it.
a faint line beneath her skin.
Silver.
Not a reflection. Not light from the moon. Something within her.
It moved. Slowly.
Almost like a pulse. Tracing along her veins in patterns that did not follow the natural paths of her body. She watched it in silence. Because instinct told her one thing clearly. This was not something to fear. This was something revealing itself. By the second night, the change had progressed. The silver lines no longer appeared only under the moonlight. They remained, faint during the day, clear at night, and they did not move randomly. They responded to her breathing, to her thoughts, to the presence of something else deep within her, the child. Seline felt it differently now, not as a distant life, not as a quiet presence, but as something aware, not fully formed, not yet visible, but aware. And that awareness began to reach her, in the only way it could, through dreams. The first dream came, without warning. She stood in a place she did not recognize. A vast clearing. Empty.
Silent.
No pack. No alpha. No border. Only space. And then, they appeared. Wolves. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Emerging from the edges of the clearing. From shadows that did not move. From directions that had no clear origin. They did not approach her. They did not circle. They did not challenge. They stopped. And then, they lowered themselves. Not slowly. Not cautiously. Completely. As if acknowledging something above them. Seline stood still. Watching. Trying to understand. And then, she heard it. Not from the wolves. Not from the air. From within. A voice. Clear. Simple. Unmistakable. They chose the wrong bond, not you. Seline did not speak. She did not respond. Because she knew this was not a dream. It was communication. The words did not carry emotion. They did not carry confusion. They carried certainty. And when she woke, the forest was no longer silent. Something had changed. She could feel it in the ground, in the air, in the distance beyond her immediate surroundings. And then she saw them again. Not in dreams. In reality. Wolves. Not from her pack. Not from any territory she recognized. They emerged cautiously. From between trees. From the edges of her vision. Watching. Seline did not move. She did not call to them. She did not command. And yet, they responded. One by one. They lowered themselves. The same way they had in the dream. Not to her. To something connected to her. Something they recognized. Without needing to understand. Seline's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The silver beneath her skin pulsed once. And the wolves held their position. No challenge. No hesitation. Only acknowledgement. This was not instinct. This was not coincidence. This was alignment. Across distances. Across territories. Across boundaries, no longer holding the same meaning. And as Seline continued to move, the pattern followed. Wherever she walked, wolves noticed. Not all. Not immediately, but enough. Enough to form a question no one had prepared to answer. Because alpha power is recognized. It is challenged, tested, proven. This was not being tested. It was being accepted. Without conflict, without resistance. And that alone should not have been possible. Seline did not claim authority. She did not assert control. She simply existed. And whatever existed within her
Did the rest.
The dreams continued, each one clearer than the last, each one revealing more than it explained. The voice did not change. It did not grow. It did not hesitate. It repeated only what needed to be understood. They chose the wrong bond, not you. Not a warning, not a threat, a correction. And corrections imply something important, that something has been misunderstood. Back within the territory, they believed the bond had been decided, that the Luna had been chosen, that the pack had moved forward. But beyond the border, something else was taking shape. Not loudly, not violently, but undeniably. Seline stood one night beneath an open sky. No territory lines, no witnesses, no constraints. The silver within her veins glowed fully now.
Clear.
Visible, unhidden. Her shadows stretched across the ground, longer than it should have been. And then,
It moved.
not with her, independently. A shift, a turn, a presence that did not follow the rules of light. Seline did not step back. She did not react. Because by now, she understood something the pack did not. This was not happening to her. This was happening through her. And whatever was emerging was not asking to be defined, only to be acknowledged. The forest remained still. The wolves remained lowered. The night held its silence. And at the center of it all stood a question. Not new, not sudden, but now impossible to ignore. The child within her was not behaving like an heir. It was not waiting, not forming quietly, not preparing to be born into power. It was already exerting it. Across distance, across boundaries, across wolves who had never seen her before, which left only one conclusion, or rather, one uncertainty. Not whether something had awakened, but what that something truly was. Because if it was not simply the future alpha, then what was growing inside her? And if it was something older, something that did not follow the laws of the pack, then what would happen when it finally arrived? There are signs a pack learns to recognize. Clear signs. Immediate signs. The kind that demand action. An attack at the border. A challenge within the ranks. A shift in leadership. But there are other signs, the kind that do not announce themselves. The kind that settle quietly into the structure of a pack and begin to change it from within. By the third night after Seline's exile, Black Ridge still stood. The banners were raised. The patrols continued. The Alpha still held his position. But something had begun to fail. Not loudly, not visibly, but steadily. It started with the warriors. Strength is the foundation of any pack. Not just physical strength, but clarity of instinct, reaction, focus. And one by one, that clarity began to slip. A warrior missed a step during training. Not from exhaustion, not from injury, from hesitation. Another failed to complete a shift. His transformation faltered midway, as if something interrupted the process. The beta noticed. He recorded it. He adjusted training schedules, increased oversight. But adjustments do not fix what is not understood. Because the issue was not effort. It was a connection. The bond that linked the pack to its alpha was no longer stable. Draven felt it next. At first, it was subtle. A delay in response. A moment where his commands did not land with the same force. Not ignored. Not resisted. But weakened. As if the connection between him and his wolves had begun to thin. He pushed harder. Spoke with more authority. Issued clearer directives. And for a moment, it seemed to work. but only for a moment, because power that must be forced is already slipping. The territory began to reflect it, not in destruction, not in visible damage, but in inconsistency. Borders that once felt solid now felt uncertain. Patrols reported gaps, not physical openings, but spaces where presence should have been felt and wasn't. The land itself seemed to hesitate, and hesitation in territory is a warning. At the center of it all stood the new Luna, unchanged, unshaken. She remained close to Draven, moved when he moved,
Spoke when spoken to.
and yet, every attempt she made to stabilize the pack
Failed.
not dramatically, not obviously, but consistently. She reinforced rituals. They weakened. She stood beside Draven during commands. The response diminished. She tried to anchor the bond, but the bond did not anchor. It resisted. The healer saw it clearly now. What had been suspected was becoming undeniable. This connection was not supporting the pack. It was draining it, not all at once, not violently, but gradually, like something drawing strength without returning it. She approached Draven,
Carefully.
deliberately, because what she needed to say could not be taken lightly. The bond is not stabilizing, she said. Draven did not respond immediately, because he already knew. He had felt it, not through the pack, through himself. His strength was no longer consistent. Moments of clarity were followed by moments of weakness. Control slipped in ways he could not explain. And then something worse began. The interruptions. Not external. Not from the pack. From within. A sensation he had tried to ignore since the ritual. The second bond. It had not disappeared. It had not broken. It had gone quiet.
But now,
It was returning. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. Enough to disrupt. Enough to interfere. And every time it surfaced, something else happened. His strength dropped. Not slightly. Not gradually. Immediately. As if something was pulling from him. Without permission. He stood alone one night. Away from the pack. Away from the Luna beside him. And for the first time, he focused on it. The second connection. He did not resist it. He did not suppress it. He allowed it to surface. And that was when he felt it. A heartbeat. Not his own.
steady, strong.
Unwavering. And with every pulse, his own power weakened. He stepped back, breath uneven, because the realization came quickly. Too quickly. The strength he was losing was not disappearing. It was being redirected to something else. Something beyond the territory. Something that had not been severed when Seline crossed the border. The child. Draven did not speak this aloud, because speaking it would make it real. And if it was real, then everything that followed the ritual, everything he had accepted, everything he had chosen, was wrong. The pack continued to weaken. Warriors struggled. Territory faltered. Commands lost their force. And at the center of it all, the bond remained. Perfect. Unbroken. Stable on the surface. But beneath that surface, it consumed. And Draven could no longer ignore the truth. What he had accepted as strength was costing him everything. He turned toward the Luna beside him, studied her, measured the connection between them. It responded immediately.
Calm.
Controlled. Unquestioning. And that was the final detail. Because real bonds are not that simple. They do not remove conflict. They do not eliminate resistance. They hold both. This one held only one direction.
Toward her.
And away from everything else. Draven stepped back. Not physically, but mentally. Re-examining the moment the bond formed. The flicker. The fracture. The split. The choice. One stable. One in pain. And he had chosen stability. But stability is not always truth. The realization settled slowly. Not as a shock, not as panic, but as something far more difficult to accept.
A mistake.
Not in action, but in understanding. Because what if the bond he chose was never meant to hold? What if the connection that screamed was the one that mattered? The pack continued to decline. The territory continued to weaken. The Luna continued to stand unchanged. And beyond the border, that steady heartbeat continued to grow stronger. With every pulse, Draven felt himself lose something he could not reclaim, leaving him with one question, not spoken, not yet answered, but now impossible to ignore. Did he bind himself to a bond that was never real? There are moments when a pack stops asking what is happening and is forced to ask what has already been done. By the time the weakness could no longer be denied, by the time the warriors faltered in open sight, by the time the Alpha himself could not hold a steady command, the question had changed. This was no longer a matter of stability. It was a matter of origin, because something had entered Black Ridge, not to strengthen it, but to alter it. The healer had waited as long as she could, not out of fear, not out of uncertainty, but because truth, once spoken, cannot be returned to silence. She stood before Draven when the pack had withdrawn. No council, no Beta, no Luna, only the Alpha, and the last person who still remembered how the pack used to feel. The bond you formed, she said, was not created to complete you. Draven did not respond, because he already understood. This was not a theory. This was confirmation. The ritual did not fail, she continued. It did exactly what it was designed to do. A pause.
Designed.
Not chosen. Not destined.
Designed.
That word alone shifted everything. Because bonds are not meant to be designed. They are meant to be revealed. Draven stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberately. Then what did it do? He asked. The healer held his gaze. Not with hesitation. Not with doubt. But with the weight of something she could no longer hold back. It redirected the connection, she said. Not severed. Not destroyed. Redirected. Draven's expression did not change. But something behind it
tightened.
From where? He asked. The healer did not answer immediately, because the answer required him to confront something he had avoided since the beginning. She turned slightly, not toward the Luna beside him, not toward the territory, but toward the border. From her, she said, Seline. The name was not spoken. It did not need to be. The silence between them filled it in. The bond was never meant to connect you to the one you chose, she continued. It was meant to contain the one you rejected. The words settled without resistance, because they explained too much.
To be dismissed.
Draven's breath slowed. The fracture, he said. The fracture was not failure, the healer replied. It was interference. Interference. Not between him and the stranger. Between him and what had already existed. The second bond you felt, she said, was the original connection. Not new. Not unexpected. Original. And the ritual, Draven began, was altered, she finished. Not corrupted. Not broken. Altered. With intention. With precision. To do something very specific. The healer stepped closer. 3 outcomes, she said. 3 purposes. Her voice did not rise, but the meaning behind it did. To seal her power.
Seline.
Not her position. Not her title. Her power. Something the pack had never acknowledged, but had always reacted to. To suppress the child she carries. Not protect. Not understand. Suppress. Because whatever that child was, it was not meant to awaken freely. And to prevent what that child would become. The final statement did not need explanation. Because Draven had already felt it. In the heartbeat. In the bond. In the steady pull of something growing stronger beyond his reach. The Moonblood King, the healer said. The title hung in the air. Not legend. Not myth. Recognition. Something recorded. something feared, something that had not appeared for longer than any living wolf could remember. Draven did not step back.
He did not speak.
Because the truth was no longer distant. It was immediate. The ritual had not chosen a Luna. It had executed a containment. The stranger had not been sent to bond. She had been sent to hold something in place. And the bond he accepted was never meant to strengthen him. It was meant to weaken something else. Something that had now slipped beyond control. Then why is it failing? Draven asked. The healer's answer came, without hesitation. Because you rejected the seal. Not the Luna. The seal. The moment Seline was cast out, the structure that held everything together collapsed. The bond could no longer redirect what it was designed to contain. The connection could no longer suppress what it was built to silence. And the result was already unfolding. The child is no longer contained, she said. Not slowly. Not partially. No longer. Draven's mind moved back through every moment. The flicker in the ritual. The second bond. The pain that did not belong to him. The heartbeat. Stronger.
Clearer.
Closer with each passing moment. And now, he asked. The healer did not soften the answer. Now it is awakening. Not forming. Not preparing. Awakening. Which meant one thing. It had always been there. Waiting. And now, it no longer needed to wait. Outside the territory. Beyond the borders that no longer held meaning. Seline walked untouched by the weakening of the pack. The silver in her veins no longer flickered. It remained. The presence within her no longer whispered. It spoke. And the wolves that encountered her did not question what they felt. They responded, because something within her had already begun to claim recognition. Not through force. Not through command. Through existence. Back within Black Ridge, Draven stood at the center of a bond that had been constructed for a purpose he had not understood. A bond that now failed to complete its design. A bond that had taken from him, without giving what it promised. And beyond it, something far greater than the pack, far older than its rules, far stronger than its control, was rising, not with announcement, not with declaration, but with certainty, leaving only one truth remaining, not hidden, not uncertain, but unavoidable. The bond had never been wrong in its creation, only in its execution. And now that it had been broken, nothing remained to stop what came next. No seal, no suppression, no control, only awakening. And the question that followed it was no longer about the bond. It was about what the bond had been trying to prevent. Because if the child was no longer contained, then what was about to be born? There are returns, and then there are reckonings. A return can be prepared for. It can be anticipated. It can be defended against. A reckoning arrives without asking permission. By the time the first report reached Black Ridge, it was already too late to contain it. A patrol at the eastern border had stopped moving. Not because they were attacked. Not because they were outnumbered. Because they had lowered themselves to the ground and refused to stand. The beta demanded explanation. The warriors could not give one. She didn't command us, one of them said. She didn't speak. We just knew.
Knew what?
That question never received an answer. Because the next report came before the first could be understood. Another pack. Rival territory. Wolves who had never submitted to Black Ridge had done the same thing. Not in fear. Not in defeat. In acknowledgement. Something was moving through the forest. Not quickly. Not forcefully. But undeniably. And wherever it passed, the response was the same. Stillness. Lowered heads. Silence that did not come from weakness, but from recognition. Draven stood at the center of his failing territory when he felt it. Not through scouts. Not through reports. Through the bond he had tried to ignore. That second connection. It did not flicker this time. It did not hesitate. It surged.
Clear.
unavoidable, closer than it had ever been before. He stepped forward without thinking, past the council, past the warriors, past the Luna who stood beside him, because something in him already understood. She was coming back, but not as she had left. The forest changed first, not visibly, not in ways the untrained eye could immediately identify, but in presence. The wind adjusted its path. The trees no longer moved randomly. The ground beneath the territory felt aware, as if everything within it had aligned toward a single point. And then she appeared, not at the center, not with announcement, at the edge of the clearing, exactly where she had once been cast out.
Seline.
But the name no longer carried the same meaning, because the woman who stood there was no longer defined by what the pack had called her. Her presence did not demand attention. It commanded it. The silver in her eyes did not reflect the moon. It held something deeper, something older, something that did not belong to the current order of wolves. She stepped forward, and the forest responded, not dramatically, not violently, but precisely. Branches shifted to clear her path. The ground beneath her steps remained steady. The air itself seemed to settle around her movement. And then the wolves reacted. Not just Black Ridge. Others. Wolves from territories that had no allegiance to Draven. No loyalty to his command. No reason to submit. They emerged from the tree line. One by one. Then in groups. They did not circle. They did not challenge. They lowered themselves. Fully. As if recognizing something that required no explanation. Draven stopped, not because he chose to, because the moment had taken control. His breath slowed, his vision fixed, because what stood before him was not the Luna he had banished. She had changed, not only in presence, not only in power, in structure. Her voice, when she spoke, did not carry a single tone. It layered, one voice, then another, perfectly aligned, as if something within her was no longer separate. And Draven felt it immediately. The bond. Not the one beside him. Not the one he had chosen. The other one. The one that had never fully disappeared. It surged forward. Not broken. Not weak. Complete. And with it came something else. A pressure. A presence. A force that did not originate from her alone. The child. Not hidden. Not silent. Visible. Not in form. Not yet. But in effect. The air around Seline shifted. Small changes that should not have been possible. Reality adjusting. Responding. As if the world itself recognized what was about to enter it. Behind Draven, the current Luna stepped back. For the first time since her arrival, her composure broke. Not outwardly. Not dramatically. But enough. Enough for the truth to surface. Because she felt it too. Not as connection. Not as recognition. As loss. The bond she held did not respond. It did not strengthen. It did not anchor. It remained exactly what it had always been. Constructed. And now, exposed. Her gaze shifted rapidly between Draven and Seline. Between the bond she believed she controlled, and the one she could no longer suppress. Because the realization had already formed. What she had taken was never meant to last. What she had held was never meant to belong to her. And what she had believed to be power was containment. A cage. And now, that cage had been opened. Seline stopped at the center of the clearing. Not claiming it. Not asserting it. Simply standing within it. And that was enough. Because nothing challenged her. Nothing resisted. The pack waited. Draven stepped forward. Every instinct pulling him closer. Every realization forcing him to confront what he had done. The distance between them closed. And for a moment, everything else disappeared. No council. No warriors. No rival wolves. Only the two of them. And the truth that stood between them. Seline looked at him. Not with anger, not with pain, with clarity. The kind that comes when something has already been decided. You didn't lose your Luna the night you banished me. Her voice carried through the clearing. Both tones.
Perfectly aligned.
You lost your heir. The words settled. Not as accusation. Not as revenge. As fact. And then, it happened. For the first time, the presence within her did not remain unseen. It spoke. Not through dreams. Not through sensation. Into the world itself.
Clear. Direct.
Unmistakable. Father, choose again. No echo. No distortion. Just a voice that should not have existed, already claiming space within reality. The clearing did not move. The wolves did not rise. The forest did not shift. Because everything was waiting. Waiting for a decision that had already once been made. And now, had to be made again. But this time, with the truth revealed. And the consequences impossible to ignore. Because this was no longer about a bond. No longer about a Luna.
No longer about a pack.
It was about what happens when something meant to be contained is finally set free. And the only question left was not what would rise, but who would stand with it when it did. Nothing moved. Not the warriors. Not the elders. Not even the wind that had followed Seline into the clearing. The moment held. Suspended, as if the world itself had paused, waiting for something it could not force. Draven stood where he was. He did not step forward. He did not step back, because for the first time since the ritual, since the bond, since the choice he believed was final, he did not know what to do. The voice still lingered in the air.
Clear.
Unmistakable. Father, choose again. It did not echo. It did not fade. It remained, not as sound, but as presence. Draven's chest rose slowly, his breath uneven, because the bond, the one he had buried, was no longer quiet. It pulled at him, not violently, not painfully, but completely. And beside him, the other bond remained, stable, controlled, but now exposed, for what it truly was. The stranger Luna did not move, but something within her shifted, not visible, not spoken,
felt,
because the connection she held was no longer enough. The wolves did not respond to her. The territory did not align with her. The alpha did not lean toward her. And for the first time since she arrived, she understood something she had not prepared for. Control was slipping, not taken. Not challenged, but removed. Seline stood at the center, unmoving, unshaken, the silver in her eyes steady, the presence within her undeniable. She did not ask. She did not demand. She waited, because whatever decision came next was no longer hers to make. Draven felt it, the weight of everything that had led to this moment.
The ceremony,
the fracture, the exile. The silence he chose over truth. And now, the return. Because this was no longer about choosing a Luna. It was about facing what that choice had done. If he stepped towards Seline, he would not just reclaim what he lost. He would admit it. That he had broken something that should never have been broken. That he had rejected something that was never his to reject. That everything that followed was built on a mistake. If he remained where he was, beside the bond he had chosen, then the cost would continue. The pack would weaken. The territory would fall. And whatever stood before him now would rise without him. And if he refused both, if he chose nothing, if he delayed, then the decision would no longer belong to him. Because the power already present in that clearing was not waiting for permission. It was waiting for alignment. The wolves remained lowered. The forest remained still. And Draven remained caught between two truths. One he chose, and one that had always been his. The silence stretched. Long enough to feel. Long enough to question. Because this was not just a moment in a story. It was a moment that demanded an answer. Was the alpha ever meant to choose? Or was the choice already made the moment he turned away from her? Was the voice that called him father, seeking connection, or claiming authority? And if the bond he trusted was never real, then what happens when something far older, far stronger, decides to correct it? The clearing did not change. Seline did not move. The stranger did not speak. And Draven had not yet answered. Because in the world of wolves, some bonds don't break. They wait until the moment they are strong enough to return.